So if you've been playing guitar for a little while and you're watching people play guitar like that and you're going, why can't I do that? What is it that's so difficult about making that sound good when I can't even get my fingers to move from one chord to the next without making a mistake? And Hi, I'm Jack Torn, and this is a little lesson about how to improve your chord changes. It can be a really frustrating part of guitar playing when you're learning to do chord changes and you can't quite get the speed up, and all you want to do is play a song, but your fingers won't let you. So we're going to look at ways to get you playing those songs as quickly as possible. So we're going to take a really common chord progression, which is going to be a G, a D, E minor, and C. And I'm going to assume that you know the chord shapes, but it's just trying to get your fingers moving between them nice and smoothly that's eluding you at this point. So I'm going to take the first chord change, which is G to D. Now the first thing you want to do is make sure that your fingers know exactly what they've got to do to get from G to D, which is why when you're first starting out playing guitar, I'd recommend doing this alongside some other things, like simple single string riff playing, just so you can get your fingers working, actually get some music coming out of the guitar as soon as possible while you're trying to get your fingers to do these chord shapes. Part of the reason that they're so tricky is that you're trying to get three of your fingers to do different things at the same time, which takes a bit of practice. Just getting one finger to do what you want it to do on the guitar can be a bit of a struggle. So getting three fingers to do what you want them to do all at once at the same time is a tough place to start. So we're going to build up to that and look at exactly what we need to do. So let's take G, for example, moving to D. And I need to know exactly what each one of my fingers wants to do. Because most people know at this stage what their first finger's doing, but what the second finger's doing and what the third finger's doing is anybody's guess. So if I play a G chord, and then move down to a D chord, I can see I'm going to concentrate mainly on what my first finger's doing to begin with. I'm going to see it's on the second fret on the A string. I'm going to move it to the D chord and it's on the second fret still, but now it's on the third string. So I can concentrate on that finger moving first. So I'm going to go back to G, give it a strum, I'm going to move my first finger into place and I'm going to build the chord around that, by that which I mean kind of bringing in the rest of the fingers to make the full chord shape. And then give that a strum, and then I've done from D to G. And if I've done, no I haven't, and I've done from G to D. And if I've done that, then I want to go back the other way, because not all songs are going to go from G to D. Some of them are going to go the other way, from the D chord to the G chord. So for the D chord, I know my first finger is on fret 2 on that third string. I'm going to give that a strum, move my first finger up to the 5th string, build the G chord with the rest of the fingers. And I've practiced that chord in two directions, from G to D and from D to G. And now my first finger knows pretty well what it needs to do for that chord change. But my second finger wasn't paying attention and doesn't really know what's going on. So I'm going to concentrate on the move that finger needs to do to get from the G to the D chord change. So I'm going to play my G chord, and in that I can see that my second finger is holding down the 3rd fret on the thickest string, the low E string. And when I change to the D chord, it's moved right down to the thinnest string, and it's up on fret 2. So when I do the chord change this time, I'm going to move from G to D, but my second finger is going to lead the way. I'm going to put my second finger down in position for the D chord first, and then build the chord around that. So starting off on the G chord, I give that a strum, and then I stop the strings, just placing my hand on the strings to stop them vibrating. And then the second finger moves right down to the bottom string on fret 2, and then I put the other fingers in place. And there's my D chord. And then obviously if I'm going to do that from G to D, I need to be able to do that in the other way round as well. So I'm going to start off on the D chord, give that a strum, and then I'm going to move my second finger from the 2nd fret on the thinnest string right up to the 3rd fret on the thickest string. And I've done that chord from G to D and from D to G. And then finally that leaves one finger left, which is the 3rd finger, which has quite an easy job in this chord change. So I'm going from the G. I can see my 3rd finger is on the thinnest string on fret 3, and all it needs to do is move to the string next door and stay on the same fret, and I can again build a chord around that. So if I start off on my G chord, I'm going to give it a strum, I'm going to move my 3rd finger into position and then bring my other fingers into position around that to build the chord, and I've moved to D, and then I want to do the same thing in reverse. So moving from D to G this time, I'm starting off with the D chord, give that a strum, 3rd finger moves down to the bottom string, other fingers move into place, and I'm now moving from G to D. At that point, I just want to go straight from G to D, and see how smoothly my fingers can go between those two chords. And because I've spent a little bit of time, I'm talking, a couple of minutes, just thinking about exactly what each finger needs to do, when I ask them to do it, they kind of got an idea exactly what needs to happen. So from the G chord to the D chord, and then the other way around from the D chord to the G chord, and each finger is pretty familiar with exactly what I want it to do. Then I might spend a little bit of time just on that chord change, seeing if I can get the chord change nice and smooth. So I'm going to give myself a count of 4, and then I'm going to move from one chord to the next, and then I'm going to strum again when I get to beat 1. What I mean by that is this. So from G to D would be 1, 2, 3, 4, and G, 2, 3, 4, and D, 2, 3, 4, and G, 2, 3, 4, and D, 2, 3, 4, and by doing it like that, it sounds pretty musical. It's kind of got a beat to it and it sounds like a song, but it's also given me plenty of time to get my chord ready. So I've got a G and I've got 1, 2, 3. I should be counting 2, 3, 4 really, but the point is that I've got 3 beats to get my next chord ready before I need to strum it. And then my G to D chord change should be feeling pretty good. And to be honest, if you're busy or you just haven't got a lot of time to play guitar, that would be in itself a good kind of 5-10 minutes spent focusing on guitar practice. That's kind of real focused practice, not just kind of playing guitar for fun. That's actually pushing your guitar playing forward and making you better as a player. So when you come back to it the next day, all that information should have settled nicely in your brain and made some good pathways in there, and that information should be much more accessible when you need it the following day. And G to D should be feeling a little easier than it was the day before, at which point you can concentrate on the next chord change. I'd recommend spreading this over a little bit of time, several practice sessions. Those practice sessions could be on the same day. You could spend 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening, wherever you've got time to do these practice sessions, and concentrate on a different chord change on each practice session. Then over a period of about a week, this chord progression is going to start feeling easier and easier and sounding better and better. So the next chord progression that comes, keep saying chord progression. What I mean is chord change. The next chord change that comes up is the D chord to the E minor chord. So starting off on the D chord, I'm moving from D to E minor. Now this one's a little bit easier because the D chord is a 3-finger chord, but the E minor only needs 2 fingers. So I don't need to worry too much about what the 3rd finger is going to do, because when I'm going from D to E minor, because it's just going to let go of the string. However, when I come back from E minor to D, I do need to remember to bring that finger back with me. So, starting off with the first finger on the D chord, I can see, I should already know in fact, having done the previous chord change, that my first finger is on the 3rd string and it's on fret 2. And I'm going to move that first finger from 3rd string fret 2 up to the 5th string on fret 2. Now that's exactly the same move that it needed to do when I was moving between D and G before, so this one should feel pretty familiar. And I can bring in the other finger and play the E minor chord. In reverse, if I was going to move from E minor to D, I can see that the first finger is on the 2nd fret on the A string, as we know, and I'm going to move that down to the 2nd fret on the 3rd string, and then bring the other fingers in around that, and I'm back to the D chord where I started. So that's pretty straightforward and pretty familiar from the last chord change that we were practicing. So the next thing to do is to look at the 2nd finger. So the 2nd finger, it starts off on the 2nd fret of the high E string when I'm playing the D chord, and when I'm playing the E minor chord, it stays on the 2nd fret, but it's now on the D string, up on the D string, obviously. So that is my E minor chord shape. So this time, moving from the D chord, holding down the chord, give that a strum, move the 2nd finger up to the 4th string, and then bring the 1st finger in to complete the E minor chord shape, and that's my chord change done. So then I'm going to give that a try. I might as well try that within 4 beats and see if I can do that. So I'm going to go 2, 3, 4, and D, changing chord, 2, 3, 4, and that chord change feels pretty good. And then when I think about what my 2nd finger is going to do when I'm going between the E minor and the D chord, the E minor, 2nd finger, as we know, D string fret 2, is going to move right down to the bottom string, and then I'm going to build a D chord around that. So let's take a look at that chord change. So we're going to go E minor, 2nd finger jumps down to the thinnest string, fret 2, the rest of the fingers come in to join in, D, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and there's my D and the E minor chord change. So to finish that off, I'm just going to try playing that with a 4-beat count, strumming on beat 1 only, and then using the remaining 3 beats to get my next chord ready. So D to E minor after 4, and then we're going to go back again to D. So that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, and D, changing chord, 3, 4, and E minor, changing back, 3, 4, and D. Let's keep it going. 3, 4, and E minor. 2, 3, 4, and D. 2, 3, 4, and E minor. And then back to D. 3, 4, and D. And then that should be the D to E minor or E minor to D chord change. Feeling pretty good. And that's now 3 chords in a row that we've got, because we should be able to start thinking about moving from G, 2, 3 to D, 4, and then to E minor, 3, 4, and like that. So let's give that a go after 4. We're going to play G to D to E minor. We've got a 4 count on each chord, and we're only playing on the first beat. So after 4, G, D, E minor. 1, 2, 3, 4, and G to D, 3, 4, and to E minor, 3, 4, and in theory, because we practice those chords changing both directions from G to D, but also from D to G, we should be able to play that in reverse as well. So we should be able to play E minor to D to G after 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and E minor, 2, 3, 4 to D to G, 3, 4, and G. And at that point, you've got something that you can actually start playing with. G to D to E minor is a pretty decent chord progression. You could go 2, 3, and 4, and 2, 3, and 4, and you can even stay on E minor for a little while, and then change direction. So E minor, 2, 3, 4, and D, 2, 3, 4, and G, 2, 3, 4, and D, 2, 3, 4. Now I speeded things up a little bit there. If that was too fast, just drop your tempo down. There's no reason for this to be lightning speed. You could be the slowest, most chilled out song in the world. It could be the slowest, most chilled out song in the world. So it could go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 2, etc, etc. There's no need for me to play through that. The whole thing, and this video is going to last for years. So that brings us to the penultimate chord change. You may think it's the last, but we've got to get back to G again at the end, haven't we? So we can go around the chord progression again. So this is the penultimate chord change, which was E minor to C. And the great thing about this chord change is that one of your fingers is going to play the same fret on the same string for both E minor and C. And when we get a chord change like that, there's literally no point in taking your finger off of a string and then putting it straight back on the same string on the same fret for the following chord. You might as well just leave it there in the first place. Although, having said that, that can be something that takes a little bit of training as well, because convincing your finger to stay put while the other fingers are moving around can take a bit of time. So let's have a look at the chord change from E minor to C. So we're going to start off with the E minor chord change. No, we're not. We're going to start off with the E minor chord. And we can see that for that, your first finger is holding down the A string on fret 2. And then we're going to change to the C chord. And we can see that your first finger is holding down fret 1 on the B string. So that's the movement the first finger is going to take from that A string, fret 2, B string, fret 1. So if we play the E minor chord, move that first finger into place, and then build the C chord from there. That's our E minor to C chord change. And then we want to try that going the other way as well. So in C, we're on fret 1 on the B string, and we're going to move it to A string, fret 2. So that'd be the C chord. Move the first finger into place for E minor, bring in the other finger, and there's your chord change from C to E minor. At that point, we can start looking at the second finger and see what that finger needs to do. So we can see that in the E minor chord, the second finger is holding down fret 2 on the D string. If we play the C chord, we can see that the second finger is holding down fret 2 on the D string, which means it doesn't need to do anything. It just needs to stay exactly where it was for both chords. So that chord change is E minor, don't move the second finger, put the other fingers in place, build a chord around the second finger, and there's C. So that chord change is more about getting your second finger to not move than it is thinking about where that finger needs to travel. Which brings us to the third and final finger of this chord change. Now in E minor, it's not doing anything, it's just hovering in the air. So it would make sense for that finger to hover round about where you're going to need it in the C chord. So if we play the C chord, we can see that the third finger is on the 3rd fret on the A string. So while we're playing the E minor chord, rather than the 3rd finger being right out of the way down here somewhere, we're going to bring it up so that it's kind of close by to the 3rd fret on the A string where we want it to be when we've done the chord change. So we're going to play E minor with the 3rd finger hovering near its destination. Then we're going to put the 3rd finger down on the 3rd fret of the A string, build the C chord around that. And we should be changing nice and smoothly from E minor to C. And then we want to try that in reverse as well. So C to E minor is going to be play the C, lift off the 3rd finger, put the 1st finger in its place, and we've done the chord change in both directions. So now we've got an E minor to C chord change. We want to try that with the 4 beats, strumming on beat 1 only. So on E minor, getting ready for C after 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and E minor. Get ready for C, 3, 4, and strum. Back to E minor, 3, 4, and E minor. And C, 3, 4, and C, 2, 3, 4, and E minor, 2 to C, 3, 4, and C, and then finish on an E minor, 3, 4, and... It sounds suspiciously like Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles because it's mostly just those 2 chords, but with the arrangement that they have on that song with all the orchestral stuff going on, it sounds absolutely incredible. So pretty much makes up the whole of that song, so that's a great song to play along with if you want to practice your E minor to C chord change. And in a chord progression that goes G to D, E minor to C, you'd be forgiven for thinking that we've got to the end, we've achieved full chord progression, but actually there aren't a lot of songs that just go round once and finish. Thank you, good night. That would be ridiculous. So chord progressions tend to go round and round and round and round again and again. So we need to make sure that we can go from the final chord of the progression, which is C, back to the 1st chord of the progression, which was G. So, final chord change. This has been a bit of a slog. This is kind of a lot of chord change and a lot of attention to detail. So I wouldn't recommend doing all of this video in one go. That would be exhausting. I'd recommend doing each chord change, come back the following day, watch the video from 3 minutes in or wherever it comes to the 2nd chord change, concentrate on that chord change, same thing again on the next day, and do a different chord change each time until they're starting to feel quite comfortable. Then start building them up into pairs and putting them all together until you can play through the entire chord progression. So to finish off the chord progression so that we can repeat it, we need to know how to go from C to G nice and smoothly. So we're going to think about each finger one at a time. So starting off with the 1st finger we can see in the C chord, we should know by now that it's on the 1st fret of the B string. If we play a G chord, that 1st finger moves up to the A string on fret 2. So we want to try that. So we're going to go from C to G with the 1st finger leading the way. So we strum the C chord, we move the 1st finger into its position on the 2nd fret on the A string, build a G chord around that, and we've done the chord change, C to G. And also we want to make sure we can go the other way as ever, so we're going to go from G. Thinking about the C chord, we know that the 1st finger is going to be on the B string on fret 1, so we're going to play the G chord and then move the 1st finger down to B string fret 1, build the C chord from there, and there is your G to C chord change. So you can go from C to G and also from G back to C. So the 1st finger's sorted. Then we can think about the 2nd finger. So the 2nd finger in the C chord is on D string fret 2, and in the G chord it is on the E string, low E string on fret 3. So holding down the C chord again, thinking about the 2nd finger this time, we're going to move that one into position first when we move to the G chord. So we give the C chord a strum, move the 2nd finger to the 3rd fret on the low E string, build in the rest of the fingers so we've got the chord shape, and then strum the G. And as ever we're going to do that the other way round. So from the G chord we know the 2nd finger is going to move from 3rd fret on the low E string to 2nd fret on the D string. So we're going to change that chord from G to C with the 2nd finger moving into position first and then the other fingers building the chord from there. So on the G chord, we're going to give that a strum. Put your 2nd finger into position on the 2nd fret of the D string and then strum the C chord. And now we are really near the end of this set of chord changes. So the final thing to do is think about what the 3rd finger needs to do to change between a C chord and a G chord. We can see in the C chord shape that it is on the 3rd fret of the A string. And then when we play the G chord, it is on the 3rd fret of the E string, the high E string this time. So we're staying on the same fret, so all we need to move is from string 5, the A string, down to string 1, which is the high E string. So holding down the C chord, give that chord a strum. 3rd finger jumps down to that bottom string, bring the other fingers in to form the G chord shape, and give that a strum. So that's C, 3rd finger into position, build the chord up, and then strum G. And as ever, we're going to go the other way around as well. So from G to C, 3rd finger on the high E string at the moment is going to move straight up to the 5th string, to the A string on fret 3. So we strum the G chord, 3rd finger jumps up to the A string, build the chord from there, and we've gone from G back to C. So that is a really detailed look at each one of those chord changes. By now, each one of your fingers should know exactly what it needs to do to move from one chord to the next, to form the entire chord progression of G to D, to E minor, to C, and back to G again. And as a bit of a bonus, you could also play the chord progression because we practice the chords going in 2 directions, going C, E minor, D, G. So either one of those chord progressions would be a good thing to try playing next. So to finish up, we are going to do exactly that. I'm going to play through that chord progression going from G to D, E minor to C. Should be pretty familiar by now. And I'll be playing on the first beat of the bar in the first progression. So that'll be 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1, 2, which will give you those 3 beats to get the next chord ready. And then when I go into the progression for the second time, I'm going to be playing on beats 1 and 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So you've only got 2 beats to get the next chord ready, and then I'm going to carry on with 3 beats per bar. So that'll be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Strumming on 3 of the beats in each bar, I should say, leaving you just 1 beat to get your chord change ready, to get the next chord ready before you need to strum it. And then finally, on the 4th time round, I'm going to be playing on every single beat. So by that point, we should be playing at full speed, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I might go around one more time just for luck, just to finish things off. So starting off on the G chord, chord progression is G, D, E minor, C. I'm going to play on the first beat of each bar and then gradually add in the strums as we go. After 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So G, 2, 3, 4 and D, 2, 3, 4 and E minor, 2, 3, 4 and C, 2, 3, 4 and G, 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4. One more time for that. And finish on a G chord. And that's all the way through the chord progression. And we've reached the end of the video, so hopefully by now your chord changes are feeling significantly easier than they did when you first came across this video and first tried the chord progression. And hopefully as a result you'll be able to play all those songs that you've been trying to learn, and they'll sound much more convincing now your chord changes are smoother and faster and more accurate and sounding the way they should. So the final thing to mention is that this approach to chord changes is pretty intense and the attention to detail is really high, and it's not something that you should need to carry on doing all the way through your guitar playing career. It's something that's kind of a really good and really effective tool to speed up how well you do your chord changes in the very, very beginning when you're just learning these chords. Once you've done that with these 4 chords, it may be worth applying it to any chords you come across in the future that you find a little bit tricky to get to, but you'll find that because your fingers are getting used to these new movements that you're asking them to do to play the guitar, you won't have to take this approach with all new chord changes. It's just a good thing to kind of really get into early on, so you can train your fingers to do these new skills that you want them to do and improve your guitar playing just a little quicker than you would if you were to just hammer out these chord changes without that attention to detail. So don't feel like it takes this much effort to learn new chords. It won't. There may be the odd chord that you find tricky where this approach would be really useful and really effective in getting you playing that chord nice and quickly. Otherwise, you'll find that your fingers will learn new chords much easier the more you play guitar. So I hope you found this video useful and it's had a real effect on your guitar playing. With any luck, you'll have found the changes in your ability to change chord pretty quick, almost instant in fact, from the beginning of one practice session to the end of it. By the end of it, the chord progression should be feeling easier to play, the changes should be much more familiar, and over a week or two, the changes should be really significant and your chord changes should be sounding super smooth and you'll be able to play all sorts of songs that you want to play. So if you have enjoyed this lesson, then do subscribe to the channel and click that little notification bell so that you know when new lessons are coming up. Finally, if you know anyone else who's learning to play the guitar or has maybe had a go at learning guitar before and got put off by how difficult these chords are to play, do share this video with them. I think it's makes a real difference at that stage when guitar can be at its most frustrating. And then hopefully we can get as many people as possible playing guitar and making music. And that is all for this video, so I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.